Everybody knows Tesla's been the leader in the EV world for years. The Model 3 and Model Y have basically been the benchmark for every other EV out there, and despite all the competition, their sales just kept holding strong. Until last year when the Xiaomi SU7 finally overtook the Model 3. Now the Model Y is facing its own challenger with the Xiaomi U7. Once Xiaomi ramps up production, it's hard to see the Model Y hanging onto that #1 sales spot. So what does Tesla do? Instead of cutting prices like a lot of Chinese brands, they decided to go on the offensive. And rather than sticking to the categories they're already strong in, Tesla stepped into a segment they've never really played in before, the family SUV. When it comes to family SUVs in China, no brand has been more influential than Li Auto. From their very first model, the Li Auto 1, they've focused entirely on this segment. And with the launch of the L9, complete with a fridge, a big entertainment screen, and those huge lounge-like seats, they basically dominated the family SUV market here for 3 straight years. Since then, just about every Chinese automaker has copied the formula. Big 3-row, 6-seat SUVs with fridges, big entertainment screens, plush seats, air suspension, CDC damping, all of that has become standard. At this point, it's hard to even find a 3-row, 6-seat SUV in China that doesn't have those features. And then along comes the Tesla Model YL. This is the only SUV in this segment brave enough to show up without a fridge, without a big entertainment screen, without lounge seats, and without air suspension, just CDC damping, and still try to sell in the Chinese market. So today I'm at a mall that happens to have both the Model YL and Li Auto's newest pure electric 3-row SUV, the i8. Let's put them side by side and see if Tesla actually stands a chance in this segment. In a lot of ways, these two are practically one-to-one rivals. Price-wise, they're almost identical. The Li Auto is only about $100 more than the Tesla. Dimension-wise, the i8 is a little longer, a little wider, a little taller, and has a slightly longer wheelbase, but is not a full-size class up. Both run a dual-motor all-wheel drive setup, and both do 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in about 4.5 seconds. So yeah, in many ways, this is a head-to-head matchup, needle tip to needle tip. Let's start with the exterior. Both of these SUVs are designed with aerodynamics in mind, which means neither of them really looks like a traditional SUV. The Model YL is basically a stretched version of the crossover Model Y, so it's got that very noticeable sloping roofline, and yeah, that obviously eats into interior space. On top of that, the ride height is extremely low, basically the same as a Model 3 sedan. In fact, to squeeze out every bit of range, Tesla actually made the ground clearance on the L even lower than the standard 5-seat Model Y. I showed this in my last video, but some people didn't believe it. So today I did the side-by-side check again with a regular Model Y. I stood my iPhone 15 Pro Max upright under the B-pillar of each car, and sure enough, the Model YL still sits lower. So yeah, that settles it. It's a fact. And it's not just something wrong with the specific display Model YL I reviewed earlier. On the other hand, Li Auto went in a completely different direction. Yes, the i8 also has a pretty low ride height, but the overall shape looks more like an MPV than a traditional SUV. Up front, you get this really short, pointy nose that honestly reminds me of a high-speed train, kind of similar to the Toyota Previa from the 1990s. Out back though, things look more conventional. There's no aggressive fastback slope here, which helps preserve passenger space inside. And when we talk about ground clearance, this is where the Li Auto i8 pulls ahead. Thanks to its dual-chamber air suspension, the i8 can actually go lower than the Model YL when it's fully dropped, giving it better aerodynamics and more range. But crank it all the way up, and the clearance is actually higher than a standard 5-seat Model Y. So basically, the i8 can play both roles. It can hunker down for efficiency on the highway or lift up when you need to tackle rougher roads. That flexibility makes it a lot more versatile for different driving scenarios. In terms of the actual numbers, the drag coefficients are almost identical. The Model YL comes in at 0.216, while the Li Auto i8 is 0.218. Now let's take a look at passenger space, starting with the Model YL. For reference, I'm 1.71 m, about 5'7". I set the driver's seat to my normal driving position and then jumped into the second row. With the seat all the way back, I had around 30 centimeters of legroom left. But to make a fairer comparison, I slid the second row forward, so there was about 10 centimeters of legroom there, and then moved into the third row. Even then, I still had roughly 10 centimeters of space for my legs. So front to back space is actually okay. No, not super generous but workable. The problem is the seat itself. The third row cushion is just way too low, so sitting back here feels like you're crouching on the floor with no thigh support at all. And even with the low cushion, headroom still isn't great because of the sloping roof line. I only had about 4 fingers of clearance at around 7 centimeters. And if you pop the tailgate, you can actually see the headrest sticking out past the D pillar. In a rear end collision, that's a big risk for head injuries in the third row. Basically, Tesla treated the third row like bonus cargo space where you can put people, but comfort and safety clearly weren't priorities. Now let's check out the Li Auto i8. Again, I set the driver's seat to my normal position and climbed into the second row. With the seat all the way back, the legroom is just massive. Honestly, it's so big that measuring doesn't even make sense. So I slid the seat forward until it hit the limit of the rails, and even then I still had about 11 centimeters of space left for my legs. Moving into the third row, things get even more impressive. I had roughly 20 centimeters of legroom back here, way more than the Model Y L, and the seat cushion itself is both high enough and long enough that my thighs were fully supported. There's also room to slide my feet under the second row seats, which gives you a much more natural and comfortable seating position. Headroom is about the same as the Model Y L. With the seat back reclined, I had only 3 fingers of clearance, and when upright, about 4 fingers, so still a bit tight. But here's the big difference. The roof above the third row isn't glass. That means in summer, you're not baking under the sun. And importantly, the headrests don't stick out past the D-pillar, which makes it safer in the event of a rear impact. Overall, the i8's third row feels like a proper seat, basically equivalent to the rear bench of a 5-seat SUV, just with a little less headroom because of the sloping roofline. So yeah, when it comes to passenger space, the Li Auto i8 wins by a huge margin. As a 6-seater, you might not be driving around with every seat filled all the time, but long road trips with the whole family are a big part of why people buy SUVs like this. That makes storage space just as important as comfort. It's the same reason vans like the Toyota Sienna or Honda Odyssey carve out those deep wells under the trunk floor to squeeze out every bit of usable room. Now, for its relatively compact footprint, the Model Y L actually does pretty well. The main trunk isn't super deep, but lift up the floor panel and you'll find a big well underneath, easily enough for a 20-inch carry-on. On top of that, there are 2 extra bins on either side, each deep enough for a daily backpack. And don't forget the oversized frunk up front. So overall, the Model Y L's storage space isn't overly generous, but it's still enough to handle luggage for 6 people on a trip. As for the Li Auto i8, the main trunk is a little deeper and slightly larger than the Model Y L's, but underneath you only get a shallow well, maybe 10 centimeters deep. Honestly, it's barely useful. And here's the real drawback, there's no front trunk at all. So the only place you have for luggage is that rear cargo area. If you're traveling fully loaded with 6 passengers, there's just no way all the bags are going to fit. So in the cargo space category, this round actually goes to Tesla, and by a pretty big margin. When it comes to interior storage, both of these SUVs do a really solid job, just with different approaches. Tesla doesn't have a fridge, so the whole center console is basically carved out for storage, and everything comes with a lid, clean and organized. Li Auto takes the more typical Chinese EV route with open storage under the console, which makes it easier to toss in something bigger like a handbag and grab it quickly. For the glove box, Li Auto's is bigger and more practical, but Tesla fights back with a passcode lock, which adds privacy and a little extra security. So in this round, I'd call it a tie. Next up, let's compare the chassis. Both SUVs use the same layout, double wishbone in the front and multi-link in the rear. On the Tesla side, the front suspension has a single ball joint upper control arm made out of cast iron. The lower arm is a double ball joint design in aluminum, but the connection between the spring damper unit and the lower arm is just stamped steel. The Li Auto i8, on the other hand, uses almost the exact same design. But here's the kicker. The upper arms, the lower arms, even that spring damper connection, they're all aluminum. So in terms of material quality, the i8 definitely feels a notch more premium than the Tesla. Looking at the rear suspension, the Model Y L only gives you a single aluminum upper arm. Everything else is steel. And the most important piece, the lower control arm, is just stamped steel. The Li Auto i8 also uses an aluminum upper arm, but here's where it surprised me. The lower arm looks almost identical to the stamped steel setup on my L9, just painted silver. But when I brought out my trusty magnet test, it turned out to actually be aluminum. Honestly, I didn't expect that because visually it really does look like plain stamped steel. So yeah, Li Auto went the extra mile here with materials. So overall, both of these SUVs use a similar suspension layout, but the difference really comes down to materials. Tesla cuts corners with cast iron and stamped steel in a lot of places, while Li Auto steps it up with aluminum pretty much everywhere it counts, even in spots where you'd expect steel. That doesn't just look better on paper, it should also help with weight savings and long-term durability. So in the chassis and suspension department, the i8 definitely takes the win. Speaking of materials, let's also look at the body panels. On the Model YL, I already showed you in my last video, aside from the front and rear fenders, all 4 doors plus both the hood and the tailgate are aluminum. The Li Auto i8 is a different story. Here, only the lower half of the tailgate is aluminum. Everything else, all 4 doors, the fenders, the hood, it's all steel. So in terms of body material, Tesla claws back some ground here. The Model YL is way ahead of the i8. Alright, let's move inside and talk about cabin comfort and features. Starting with the windows, both SUVs use double pane acoustic glass for the front and rear, but the Li Auto i8's glass is noticeably thicker. That means you can expect even better noise isolation and wind noise reduction compared to the Tesla. Now let's talk interior materials. Both cars use a lot of leather wrapping, but Tesla mixes in some fabric too. You'll see these gray and white cloth inserts on the door panels, the dashboard, even the seat backs. Personally, I think it looks kind of cheap, and fabric is always harder to keep clean. The Li Auto i8, on the other hand, goes full leather wrap everywhere, which definitely feels a bit more premium. But if we're talking about design, honestly, neither one really stands out. You could call it minimalist, or you could say it's just plain boring, depends how generous you're feeling. When it comes to the seats, the difference gets even bigger. Teslas are thin, wrapped in a really cheap-feeling synthetic leather that's almost paper thin. They're not comfortable to sit on, and in the second row, the bolsters are barely there, just a slight curve with no real support. The recline range is fine, but nothing special. Li Auto, on the other hand, went the complete opposite direction. The seats are thick and plush, wrapped in soft Nappa leather that feels way more premium. In the second row, you get serious side bolsters that actually hold you in place when the car's cornering. And on the right side, you even get a zero-gravity seat with a leg rest so long that when I laid back, it actually supported my feet. That's really impressive. Oh, and don't forget, the first 2 rows in the i8 also come with massage. Compared to the Model YL, Li Auto is just miles ahead when it comes to seating comfort and features. Up front, remember when the Model S first launched and the giant center screen replacing all the physical buttons felt revolutionary? Well, years later, Tesla hasn't really moved forward from that. The Model YL still doesn't have a driver display, no head-up display either, just a 16-inch infotainment screen stuck in the middle. So yeah, every piece of info means turning your head to look at it, and even shifting gears has to be done on the screen. At least Elon brought the turn signal stalks back. The steering column itself hasn't changed, so in China you can even go through a third party and add a proper gear stalk back in if you want. Over in the Li Auto i8, you don't just get a big center screen, the front passenger gets their own equally large entertainment screen too. There's still no dedicated driver display, but instead you get a head-up display that's packed with information. It shows everything you'd normally expect on a driver display: speed, gear position, navigation, even the surround view driving data. So all the critical info is right there in your line of sight. Look up, and here's another difference. Tesla doesn't give you a physical sunshade for the glass roof, and you're stuck with a plain optical rearview mirror. Li Auto, on the other hand, fits a high-definition digital rearview mirror. So even in the rain, you'll still have a clear view of what's going on behind you. In the second row, Tesla only gives you that little 8-inch screen on the back of the center console. It handles some basic controls and a bit of entertainment, but that's about it. Li Auto takes it way further. Back here, you get a massive 21.4-inch entertainment screen, and right below it in the center console is a built-in fridge. It can adjust anywhere from 0 to 50 degrees Celsius, so you can keep drinks ice cold or even keep food warm. On a hot summer day, you can just reach back and grab a chilled Coke. That's the kind of family-friendly feature people really love. On top of that, the i8 second row side windows also come with sunshades. They're manual, not powered, but hey, it's still way better than not having them at all. And on the back of both front seats, you'll find fold-out tray tables. Super handy for grabbing a quick meal on the road or even getting a little bit of work done while you're on the move. Now, let's move on to the driving experience. First up, the Model YL. According to the data from China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, this car shares the same motor setup as the 5-seat Model Y. The total power output is 462 horsepower, which is slightly more than the 450 horsepower in the 5-seat version. However, due to the increased curb weight, an extra 96 kilograms, the 0 to 100 kilometers per hour acceleration time has dropped a bit, going from 4.3 seconds to 4.5 seconds. As for the suspension, in addition to the CDC dampers, the rest of the suspension setup and materials remain unchanged from the 5-seat version. So we're looking at the same familiar setup, just with a bit more weight and a slightly more relaxed performance. During the test drive, I noticed that the comfort level in the Model YL has been further improved compared to the 5-seat version. The suspension has become much softer, and when going over rough roads, the impacts are barely noticeable. This setup offers two driving modes, one called balance mode and the other rear comfort mode. From the names alone, you can tell that this suspension is tuned for pure comfort. It's not just the suspension. Even the throttle response and regenerative braking have been dialed back significantly. Especially the regen braking, even when set to its highest setting, the deceleration is very mild. Honestly, it's quite similar to the tuning you'd find in other Chinese electric vehicles, and strictly speaking, this doesn't even qualify as a one-pedal driving experience. For example, here, I completely lift off the throttle and rely solely on regen braking to slow down. From 84 kilometers per hour down to 34, it took a full 7 seconds. One more thing to note is the stock tires. Tesla equips the Model YL with Continental EcoContact EV tires. These are efficiency and comfort-oriented tires made specifically for electric cars. But in the rain, grip is just average. During my test drive, I experienced wheel slip under both hard braking and hard acceleration. So yeah, on wet roads, you'll want to ease off and definitely avoid pushing it too hard. Now, steering is still very Tesla. The steering ratio is tighter than most cars and the body response is super sharp. Even though this SUV stretches out to 4.9 meters, it never feels clumsy. Lane changes and overtakes are effortless, just small steering inputs, and it darts through traffic like a much smaller car. The driving feel here is excellent. Overall, the Model YL shows that Tesla has made some very deliberate adjustments for Chinese family buyers. They know exactly what customers here are looking for. And while they didn't load up the cabin with things like a fridge, huge entertainment screens, or those lounge-like seats, they did tune the chassis and drivetrain toward comfort, all in an effort to compete directly with Chinese-built electric SUVs. Alright, let's switch over to the Li Auto i8 test drive. Now this thing is a heavyweight. Curb weight comes in at 2.6 tons, which makes it 522 kilograms heavier than the Model YL. That's about 25% more. Power-wise, it's rated at 544 horsepower, just 82 more than the Tesla, or roughly 18% more. But here's the interesting part. Despite the big difference in power-to-weight ratio, both SUVs hit 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in the same time, 4.5 seconds. My guess, Tesla intentionally limits output to stretch range as much as possible. As for suspension, the i8 packs a dual-chamber air suspension combined with CDC dampers. At highway speeds, it can lower itself to reduce drag and boost efficiency, and when the road gets rough, you can raise it up to improve the breakover angle and overall clearance. It's the kind of flexibility you'd expect in a family SUV designed for a wide range of real-world conditions. With the i8, Li Auto took the comfort levels they already nailed with the L series and pushed it even further. Thanks to the simpler packaging of a pure EV platform compared to a range extender, they've had more freedom to fine-tune NVH, and you can see the results, or rather hear less of them. To cut wind noise, they ditched the traditional SUV profile altogether. In fact, they went even further than some short-nosed EV SUVs, shaping the whole car more like a bullet train. The result? Much lower wind noise. Now, in terms of ride quality, if what you're after is pure comfort, the i8 just steamrolls the Model YL. The damping, the isolation from road noise, it's all at an industry-leading level. This really matches Li Auto's brand philosophy, ultimate comfort, Honestly, this suspension tuning, much like what we found in the new Xpeng P7, goes beyond family comfort and into executive sedan territory. The difference is the i8's bigger size and higher ride height keep it just a notch below the P7 in absolute refinement. But still, driving over city streets feels like someone laid down a layer of rubber track, like a running stadium surface under your wheels. That said, when you hit a pothole at speed, you'll still notice a faint aftershock, just enough to remind you it's not quite Rolls-Royce level. But when it comes to driving dynamics, I'll be straight with you. Don't waste your time looking for fun behind the wheel. This is a car where you just let the driver assist systems do their thing and enjoy the ride. First off, regeneration. I cranked it up to the max setting, lifted off the accelerator completely, and nothing, no noticeable deceleration at all. At one point, I honestly thought the regen was off. After double checking with the sales rep, nope, it was on max. Here's an example. I lifted off at 58 kilometers per hour and it took a full 4 seconds to coast down to 45. That's basically the same as a gas car just freewheeling in neutral. Acceleration tells a similar story. Even in the highest performance mode, throttle lag is more pronounced than in the Model YL. Sure, if you stomp on it, you'll still get that strong push back into the seat, but it always feels half a beat delayed. Steering, heavy and a little clumsy with a constant sense of heft. And then there's the ESP. It's tuned super conservatively. No matter how hard I accelerated or braked, I couldn't get the tires to slip. That's probably helped by the Michelin e-Primacy tires it's running. I even hit standing water on one side of the car at 80 kilometers per hour. The car drifted slightly, but ESP snapped it straight almost instantly. So yeah, the handling is locked down, stable, drama-free, and honestly, passion-free. Everything about the dynamics screams one mission: keep rear passengers comfortable. Compared to the Model YL, the i8 doubles down even harder on that philosophy. Comfort and stability take center stage, while driving excitement never even got invited to the party. After wrapping up the test drive, I also checked out Li Auto's 5C fast charging. Now, since the battery still had 76% left, we couldn't see its absolute peak numbers. Even so, the charging power still hit 200 kilowatts. As the state of charge climbed, the power gradually tapered off, but even at 85%, it was still pulling 150 kilowatts. And get this, topping up from 76 to 85% took just 2 minutes and 55 seconds. That's seriously impressive. I wasn't able to test the charging situation for Tesla, but based on some real-world tests done by media in China, the results are far from impressive. When charging the Model YL at Tesla's V3 supercharger, it peaks at nearly 250 kilowatts, but that power only lasts until the battery reaches 15%. After that, it drops sharply. From 20% battery, the charging power stays at around 110 kilowatts all the way to 60%. The time it takes to charge from 5% to 90%, a full 57 minutes and 41 seconds, and this was consistent across 2 separate tests. In contrast, the Li Auto i8 takes just around 17 minutes to charge from 5% to 90%. So, in terms of charging experience, Tesla is seriously falling behind China's 5C ultra-fast charging technology. As for range, based on real-world tests by some media outlets, the Model YL leads the Li Auto i8 by a significant margin. During highway range tests, the Model YL covered 565 kilometers at an average speed of 104.8 kilometers per hour, while the i8 covered 507 kilometers at an average speed of 104.4 kilometers per hour. This translates to a 100 kilometer energy consumption of just 14 kilowatt hours for the Model YL, while the i8 uses 18.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. To be fair, while Tesla's cabin lacks many comfort features, which reduces energy consumption, this still doesn't account for the huge gap. Tesla's energy management is truly ahead of the competition. However, when you factor in charging speed, Tesla's advantage is completely neutralized. Tesla takes an extra 40 minutes to charge, which is enough for the Li Auto i8 to cover an additional 70 plus kilometers. Over a 1,000 plus kilometer trip, the Li Auto i8 would actually finish first, making up the time lost during charging and completing the journey ahead of the Model YL. To wrap it up, Tesla has stuck to its lightweight strategy, which means even when targeting purely family-oriented users, they haven't loaded the cabin with many comfort features. Instead, they've focused on tuning the suspension for comfort. This is why the Model YL's pricing caught many off guard. Most people expected it to be priced similarly to the Model Y Performance, but the actual price is only about $3,700 more than the all-wheel drive Model Y. This will likely sway many potential customers who were originally planning to buy the AWD Model Y over to the Model YL. However, I believe this wasn't Tesla's original intention. By significantly altering the suspension tuning, it's clear that Tesla aims to capture a slice of the market for China's electric 3-row 6-seat SUVs. Yet, with its cramped cabin space and lack of comfort features, I personally think that relying solely on a more comfortable suspension may not be enough to achieve that goal. Instead, they should stick with their distinctive sportier tuning, creating a differentiated offering to compete against China's 6-seat SUVs. This would appeal to potential customers who want to use the Model YL as a large 4-seat vehicle. On the other hand, Li Auto has maintained its focus on the family vehicle market. For the same price, they offer more comprehensive comfort features from the cabin to the suspension. The range of configurations far outshines Tesla. However, in order to achieve low drag, they've adopted an aggressive design that completely steps away from the traditional SUV look. The pros are obvious: reduced wind noise, longer range, and more spacious seating. The cons, however, are equally clear: extremely limited storage space, and this design may alienate some consumers. In China, many still care about the car's appearance. People prefer large, powerful SUVs, not minivans. This is why Li Auto's L series has been so popular. Moreover, the large 6-seater setup must consider long-distance driving, and storage space is a key factor in purchasing decisions. Sacrificing storage space and styling for range, in my opinion, is not worth it. Of course, Tesla doesn't come out much better either. They've significantly sacrificed third-row passenger space for the sake of range. So which one would I choose at the same price? Personally, I'd go with the Li Auto i8. Li Auto can address the storage space issue by installing a roof rack, but Tesla, in my opinion, it's not quite a qualified 6-seater SUV. It's more of a big 4-seater. That's it for today's review. Who do you think comes out on top? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. See you next time. Peace.